Before I begin with today's topic, I thought I would do a video that isn't directly from the Star Wars Andor series. Yes, it kind of links to it, but there shouldn't be any spoilers for the show in this video. So, sit back and relax. With the Andor series being well underway and only 3 episodes remaining in the latest Star Wars series, we know how it'll end. Spoiler: the Death Star will kill Cassian Andor after he helps Jyn Erso get the plans from the tower on Scarif. I know I'm horrible for spoiling that for you, but with the Andor series in full swing, it makes me think back to Rogue One, A New Hope, and Return of the Jedi with some minor questions. Maybe I'm alone in these thoughts, and maybe I overanalyze too much. It's a fault I live with. But I've seen a lot of people ask these same questions, so maybe I'm not as alone as I thought. First, when was the Death Star manned or staffed? Meaning, were the troops and staff thrown aboard when it was completed, not knowing what it was they were doing until the right time? And for my second question, why did it take almost 20 years to build the first Death Star and only 4 years to make an operational second, larger Death Star? Well, sit back and let's see if we can try to figure this out together. If you're a huge Star Wars nerd such as myself, then you've come to the right place because that's all I talk about. And I upload new content really whenever I can. So if Star Wars is something you love or even just find interesting, then hit that subscribe button and join this growing group of Star Wars fanatics. Now, on with the topic. I know a few people are saying, who cares about these questions? Just watch Star Wars and enjoy it. And they aren't wrong. I do watch Star Wars as much as I can, and I enjoy each Star Wars project that I watch. And it isn't that I'm being negative with the questions that I have, or even that I really need an answer to those questions. I see it more as a fun little thing that I do to pass time in between episodes and help people connect through deeper discussions. I don't really mind if my thoughts filling in these gaps is wrong, or even goes unanswered. Such as the question I've been trying to answer as to what Cassian Andor and the other inmates of Narkina 5 are building. It may just be nothing. It may be Death Star components or other needed tech for the Empire. The actual parts aren't central theme to the show, but that's enough rambling, I guess. But make sure you stick around for the whole video or you may miss something fun. Maybe. Let's get on with it, shall we? The first question is, when was the first Death Star actually staffed? And when I try to give my explanation, keep in mind that all we have to go by are examples of our own real-world situations with similar circumstances. Yes, I know George Lucas said he wanted the Star Wars galaxy to be unbelievable and unrealistic. That's why we have TIE fighters not being aerodynamic, flying in atmospheres of planets with gravitational pull. It's also why a mile-long Star Destroyer can hover above a city. It's unbelievable and unrealistic, and we have to suspend what we know to immerse ourselves in the Star Wars stories, and that's okay. But let's get back to the question at hand of when the Death Star would have been staffed. The Death Star was new technology, something that had never been tried. We can look at it like a new owner of a self-driving Tesla figuring it out as they go for the first time. But that's a car, and most of us have a basic understanding of how to drive. So the same could be said for those piloting the Death Star. It may be controlled similarly to a Star Destroyer, possibly. Other than it's a floating ball, which would handle much differently and have a more limited view of the structure in tighter places. But who is trying to squeeze a small moon-sized ball between aircraft or asteroids? It isn't made to dodge fire from attacking ships. It's made to reach a destination, stay static for a bit, then move on to another destination once that job is complete. So piloting may not need as much training as other areas. That means the bridge could possibly be manned rather rapidly. They would need some limited training, though, for the advanced systems, as this has never been tried before. The manning of the main superlaser may be a bit trickier. This is brand new technology, as we have seen in Rogue One, the Star Wars story, and the novels leading up to it of how Galen Erso was the one to finally crack the means to make it fire and destroy entire planets. This would take training to operate. Remember, the superlaser wasn't finished being constructed until just before the events of A New Hope, and those operating it seemed to do it with relative ease, both in A New Hope and in Rogue One, so it may just take a simple throw of a switch, as we can see by the operators. But maybe they had training on the firing of the weapon and just waited for the actual function to come around. So these weapons operators may have been aboard as soon as it was made suitable to sustain life, or up until the time it was ready to actually use. Then there are those who man and maintain the nuclear core, which gives it power to operate all the systems. And in our own world, it takes years of training to learn these systems on naval vessels. But the question is, would the Empire bring in new recruits to an important new project such as the Death Star, or would they use staff who have experience and have shown their capabilities on other vessels? I think it would be the latter, honestly, due to the importance and immediate need for the Death Star. But there would still need to be training, vetting, and testing of those systems. Not to mention getting the nuclear systems online. It's fairly safe to say these guys and gals have been hard at work ever since the nuclear core was installed, before its actual functionality was ready. There are other manners of staffing that are considered to a lesser degree, such as regular weapons and turbolasence technicians and operators. These could be staffed once it's online and the vetting process is concluding. But there's one group of staffing that seems minor, but is the most significant: military troops and their officers. With the secrecy of the Death Star, there's a need for security. From the earliest days of construction, any leak of this weapon would be catastrophic for the project. Sure, there would have been security ships surrounding the outer construction, making sure no one got close enough to see what was going on. But what about inside? Some random contractor posting selfies on Facebook inside the Death Star would become problematic. Security teams would need to be present and watching every move made by those building it. Let's face it, the Empire knew it had enemies, and discovering this ultimate weapon would mean its doom before it even got up and running, if there were even one contractor with loose lips. So the troops would have been staffed from the beginning. I'm sure someone will say that it needed to be staffed with troops once life support was online. That's a fair assessment, but we know they had special jetpack troops and droids that could withstand the vacuum of space. Then one could say, why don't they have droids instead of humans building it and watching over it? And that's fair as well, but there would need to be technicians available in case a droid malfunctioned, not to mention the monitoring of these droids. One rebel droid in the mix would be fairly easy to get through. Look how many times Chopper was able to infiltrate the Empire with a single, simple paint job. Repurposed Imperial security droids would also be easy to slip in. Again, the vetting process of any troop needing access to the facility would be deep and thorough. A random rebel dressed as a jetpack trooper could be discovered quickly, and that isn't to say they never tried, but look at how long it took the rebellion to learn of the Death Star's existence. It was near completion. The same with the second Death Star, so it's fair to say the first Death Star had been manned since the earliest days of construction, some 19 years before it fired its first devastating shot on Jeddah City, with the first being the security forces along with the construction crews. And once life support was ready, the nuclear technicians, higher-ranking commanders, would follow suit to get to know their new home, which some may never be permitted to leave. Ever. I bet you forgot about the second question. Why did it take 20 years to build the first Death Star and only 4 years to make the second larger Death Star operational? And yes, I know it was only 19 years, but I rounded up. Shoot me. But I'll answer a quick question that I just thought of. Why make it the second one bigger if the first was able to destroy planets? Well, the technical Star Wars answer for this would be, we never really got to see the full capabilities of the second Death Star. Maybe it was enhanced to destroy multiple planets at once, similar to Starkiller Base. Oh no, did I make a boo-boo by saying something about the sequel trilogy? Man, who cares? I'm just saying it may be that we don't know what the second Death Star was capable of. But the funny, real-world answer would be that Emperor Palpatine was from Texas and he likes everything big. Does that suit you a little bit better? All jokes aside, though, why did it take a fifth of the time to build the second Death Star? Well, we don't know when construction of the first Death Star completed. All we know is that it took that long to create the technology to make the super laser functional, so the shell may have been constructed and completed years before the laser was ready to install. But with the size and the limited staff that would be permitted to build it, I don't think that's the case. That means the second Death Star would have taken equally as long to complete, if not longer. Remember, the second Death Star wasn't finished when it was used in the Battle of Andor, but they had the tech to make the weapon operational with limited functionality. This may account for the reason it took a land-based shield generator to protect it. Its own shield generator wasn't ready to be installed. So this second Death Star probably began construction just a few short years after the first one was going on to seem viable. With limitations to the first Death Star being apparent, the second began construction. And although the first Death Star would have limitations, it was too late in the game to scrap it and begin the second one. They needed its presence to be intimidating and destructive, which it was. But then you have to ask, why did they change the flawed thermal exhaust port from that of the first Death Star to that of the second Death Star before they knew it was a weakness in the first one? Simple. Revisions in construction when the thermal exhaust port was exploited by the rebellion. Construction projects in our own world often are delayed due to unforeseen circumstances, and revisions are made. And to the Empire, with vast unlimited resources, it may have been able to modify it quickly, albeit costly. But there was no TIE Defender project to get in the way of the funding at this time. Okay, I hope this was informative, or at least made you think of other options that I didn't get to. Like I said before, these don't necessarily have to be answered. In some cases, it would be tedious to answer every little question we have for the writers of the Star Wars projects. They did a good job at answering why the first Death Star had a huge flaw built into it, and they should probably just leave it at that. We can use our imaginations to fill in the gaps for the rest. I really don't need everything explained to me. This was just a fun little discussion I wanted to create. Look, I probably could have made this video into a 1-minute TikTok, but this isn't TikTok. This is YouTube, a place where we get to be detailed in talking about Star Wars. I'm long-winded, and I like to talk about different aspects of Star Wars. Otherwise, my TikTok would be better than it is. I wouldn't be up at 2 a.m. making videos for you all to enjoy if TikTok was really my thing. Again, if you love Star Wars, then hit that subscribe button and join me for these detailed and long-winded conversations. If you can't get into this subject, then leave a comment as to what you would like to talk about. I really can't wait for The Mandalorian Season 3 in February, as that is what this channel used to focus on in the past. And I'll get back to that when I have newer material to go off of. But I'm a little worried it won't hold up to the production value of Andor. Maybe it will. I have to be hopeful. This is Gerald from Star Wars Fanatic signing off, wishing you all great health, happiness, and peace. Thank you all for watching, and remember, this is the way, the only way.